Everybody, happy Tuesday or Wednesday. Hope everybody had a good week. And what do we got for questions, Pedro?
I can't see you yet.
Oh, you can't see me yet?
It's kind of turny. I wonder if I've seen you. Look how it's doing.
A twin. Some boards are designed specifically for certain fin setups, but that doesn't mean you can't. You could put a single fin box in a Dwart, and if that's the vibe you're into, that's the vibe you're into. On the Bali single, that was a project we did about 6-7 years ago. Kind of a promotional thing, and tied it in with Josh Kerr, and he lights it up on anything. But he really lit up the single fin. I mean, he was doing big airs and all kinds of crazy maneuvers. But not everybody serves as good as Josh Kerr. So, we've built it as a tri-fin, and we've built it as a quad. And the five fin setup is the most versatile. Is the most that not everybody wants 5 boxes in their boards. The Bali single, you can put any fin configuration you want on it. The biggest mistake to avoid when shaping, that's a good one. There's a lot of mistakes you can make. I think I made mistakes continuously for the first 10 years. But occasionally I still make a mistake. But I think the biggest mistake really is pick your time. Over time some shapers become quite efficient, and they can hand shape a shortboard in freaking 40 minutes. But on average, an hour to an hour and a half to hand shape a board, shortboard. And as you get in the guns, it's going to take you 2-3 hours. And if you're more of a beginning shaper, don't rush yourself. I for a long time used to cut my boards out. I'd rough them out, and then I'd go on to the next one. And either at the end of the day or usually the next day when I was fresh, I'd look at them, and I still had time to make adjustments or changes to the shape. And back when I used to hand shape, that used to work quite well. So I'd say just, take your time, relax. And, if you happen to get busier, I'd say still, don't rush. At one time I had a backlog for 3 or 4 months, before I could get to a custom, or stock boards for that matter. But as you get busier, then you'll have to look at other things, like whether or not you want to use the computer or cutting service or ghost shapers or guest shapers or whatever. I think taking your time is probably the best advice I can give someone. How often do you shape non-foam boards, and are they more for art or use? I shape a few a year. I've done agave boards, I've done balsa boards, balsa redwood boards, and then I've done a few all redwood boards. And I'd safely say that maybe a handful of them have been ridden over the years. Most of them are wall hangers. but they make a beautiful wall hanger, and yeah, the balsa boards, you can glass them, fairly light, and they work all right. But I have several of Greg Knoll's nods to the Duke. I don't know if you can. There's one right there. It's hard to see. But a couple of 10-foot redwood boards from Greg Knoll. And I paid $10,000 for them, but it's a lot of money. But in my book, they're priceless. And I have a few other boards in my collection from other shapers that are all wood. And I made a couple for friends for their offices. John Sun, year one. The pros and cons of a swallowtail on your standard shortboard. That's a pretty good question. The swallowtail is, I've gone through this tail thing many, many times, but a swallowtail extends your rail line. It gives you a little bit straighter rail line, but it takes out some of the area behind your back foot, and so you get a nice pivot on a turn, a nice corner to come off of. But I think they hold in a little bit better than squash tails. Squash tails are probably the most popular tail design. And then after that, it's kind of up for grabs. I mean, the Dort's a double wing round tail, which is probably our best-selling board. The SD is a thumb tail, and the Slayer series Blackbirds are all pretty much round tails. Some of them come to a slight point, but I think a swallowtail is a good, definitely. I mean, I used to stay with Pat Rawson in the 90s, the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I used to marvel at his guns. Pat, you're the master. The beginning of the tri-fin era, for at least 10, 15 years, you made, some of the most beautiful guns. And I was shipping, a lot of 9-footers, 9.6s, and they had 3 or 4 inch swallowtails from corner to corner. And I'm kind of, rambling off, but I see a lot of guns from back in the day, in the late 50s, early 60s, that didn't have the crazy pintails that we went through for a while. They had narrow square tails. But for small waves, I think a swallowtail is good, because you can have a tail that's 15.5, 16 inches wide, and maybe 6.5, 7 inches corner to corner. And as you want to become more fishy, a straighter outline, you pull the tail out to 8. That's kind of a semi-fish, and fishes are usually like 9 or 10 inches from corner to corner. And so you have a lot of area under your foot. You have a straighter outline, but you have less area behind your back foot. So I don't know if you've seen, watched, I don't know, for instance, Dane Reynolds. He likes, what was that model he had at Channel Islands with the big wide square tail?
Dumpster diver.
The dumpster diver. Dane rips on anything too. You give him a door and he could rip on it. But if you watch him surf on those very wide square tails, it's hard for him to finish his turns, or it's more difficult because of all the area behind his back foot. I think there's a handful of guys on tour that ride swallowtails, but For smaller, grovelly hot dog boards, I think it's a great idea. Lavaldum. You want cheap boards? I'll tell you a little story. I think I've told this before, but back when I started surfing, gas was 20 cents a gallon. A brand new glossed and finished longboard in the store was $200. So fast forward today, just say gas for argument's sake is $4 a gallon. That's a multiple of 20. Guess what surfboards are? A multiple of 4, between 4 and 5. It's the best deal on the planet at $1,000. You know, if you buy boards from beginners that are desperate to learn and want to get their numbers up, you can get boards for materials and $10 or something like that. But any shaper with experience that he doesn't have to be a very well-rounded shaper, but if he's got experience in kind of one field or the other, please respect that it's some of the best shapers in the world, I don't know, make 40 grand a year. And I hate it when somebody pulls up to the factory in an $80,000 car and they come in and they start talking about the board. And it doesn't take long before they say, well, can I get a deal? I look out the car and I look back at them and I go, yeah, you get a deal. I'll charge you an extra $100. But no, please have respect, for a shaper, especially when he's committed his life to. And they might be making $100 a board, 150. But I'm kind of joking with you, but at the same time, I'm serious. Shaper's art. It takes a lifetime to develop. So, what else we got?
This guy is asking you if you ever work on have you ever worked in production line or just only shape? I think you did a lot of different things, right? Glassing.
No, in the early days, the artist in me, I wanted to learn how to airbrush, and I used to airbrush all of my boards. In the early days at Canyon, I airbrushed a lot of the boards. We had John could do the color and the lamination, but we had an airbrusher, and then he left, and John said, "Oh, fuck it, we don't need color." And I said, "Yes, we do." So I stepped in and I polished up my airbrushing skills. So my daily routine in the late 70s, early 80s was I'd get up pretty early in the morning, not before sunrise, but not soon after, and I'd go to the beach. I'd try to find some waves, surf for an hour or two, and then I'd go to my shaping room and I'd crank out 4, 5, 6 hand shapes, and then my shaping room used to just be down the street from the Canyon Glass Factory, and I'd drive the shape blanks down there, and then I would start airbrushing, and I'd airbrush until 10 o'clock at night or midnight, and then I go out and have a couple of drinks with the friends, and wake up the next morning and do it all over again. And I used to laminate my own boards when I was at GNS. I probably laminated a couple hundred boards, but and I probably sanded 5. Sanding it's all an art, building a surfboard, but sanding those guys are sanders are really undervalued. They can really, you give a identical board to 5 different shapers, and I'll tell you what, everyone later some will come out with more detail.
Different sanders.
Different sanders, yeah. It's finding a good sander that, he's got a good attitude, comes to work every day, and cares about the boards. You got a shining star if you can find a sander like that.
The edge is so important.
And the edge, yeah, and the shaper kind of determines where the edge starts and where the edge kind of finishes. But if you think about it, after you've got about 2 or 3 layers of cloth wrapped around the rail and a hot coat, it becomes dull out of detail. And if you got a close connection with your sander, he'll get it back to where you left it as a shape blank, pretty much. So no, I was never. I was a production shaper, for G&S, 72, 73, 74, and I was fortunate because I got to do a lot of boards. In the dead of winter, it kind of got slow, so I didn't get to shape that much, but pretty much March through almost Christmas, I was pretty busy. January, February, part of March, it was kind of slow. But I used to be a production shaper, and then I started the music boards, and that was more of a custom business, and went back to UCSD, came out, and I started shaping for a lot of board companies all over San Diego, but primarily North County. Shout out to John Keys. Shout out to the Sunset Boys. I did a lot of boards for Sunset. I think I did, 200-300 one summer and a couple hundred the next summer.
All hand-shaped.
All hand-shaped.
Yeah.
All hand-shaped.
Detail.
And, my early trips to, Australia and Japan and Europe and stuff, I try to set my pace for 10 hand shapes a day. It was brutal, and I usually went for like 10 days on pure shaping trips. I'd get to see a little bit of the countryside, but and on those trips they're pretty much all custom boards. And then at Canyon we got busier and busier, and as I said earlier, I had 3 or 4 month backlog when I gave my notice, and I honored them. Gave my notice on 4th of July and finished up in early November. October, 4 months. And with the Rusty brand, I wasn't sure how I was going to go, but on day number 2, I was buried. So I already had kind of a ghost shaper, Steve Bartow and Roger Beal. Roger moved back east 25 years ago, 30 years ago. He still shapes on real boards, still surfs. So does Steve. But they were my first ghost shapers. And I mean, there was periods of time, especially when I used a KKL machine I had my own Pendarvis kind of profiling machine in the late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, and that kind of helped. And then I went to KKL for a while, which is the first computer-driven shaping machine here in the States that I know of, and they're still in business. And I used them for a little while, but I started to feel guilty, for my shapers, because they'd have to do almost 3 times the boards off the machine as what they got paid for hand shaping. And so I stopped using the machine for a little while, and then around 2000, I think, I got my very first own computer shaping machine. And like I said, I got all respect for hand shapers, but after you've shaped for 50 years and personally hand shaped almost 50,000 boards, your body starts to wear out, and I think all the beginning shapers, it's great that they learn how to hand shape, because there's some shapers that start off to kind of get a name for themselves, and I have mixed feelings about that. But yeah, I think the hand shaping is a basic skill that is not a basic. It's not a basic art, but it's a very important baseline skill. And so, yeah, I was never the only thing other than shaping that I could maybe claim production, if I'm answering the question right, is maybe airbrushing for a few years at Canyon.
I got a good one here.
Oh.
To make the fastest board, it is as simple as having a flat rocker. To make.
That's another interesting question.
Yeah.
The board can't be it can't be completely flat. There's a lot of things, I don't think a single fin is the fastest fin configuration. I believe a fish or a quad fin is the fastest fin configuration. The rocker, flat tur rockers are fast. If you get the rocker too flat, then the board's going to be limited to what parts of the wave it fits on. And if you had the wave with a perfect line, you could, it's like riding a door. And there's a handful of people on this planet that can ride a door. But I think a flatter rocker and a twin fin setup or a quad fin setup, and the fin angles are really important too. The straighter ahead they are, the faster the board's going to go. If they're dead straight ahead, like a lot of fishes are, the board runs unbelievably fast, but it's hard to break the line. And the same thing with quads. You can mess around with the fin angles, towards the nose and also the tilt out. Yeah, that's a good question, because if you're honest about where you surf on the average, and if it is shoulder to shoulder high at the most, knee high to shoulder high, and kind of soft surf, you might want to look at the flatter rocker designs, like especially the Fish series, the 419, the Dwart. And it doesn't, the average 6.0 hot dog board, the average 6.0 that I shape is maybe 2 1/8 inches of tail rocker, and 4 1/4 to 4.5 inches of nose rocker, maybe closer to 4.5. And if you add an 1/8 of an inch to the tail, that people get so hung up on volume. I'm not going to spend too much time on that this week. You get so hung up on volume, but nobody ever, I tweak the rockers a little bit, for people depending on their weight, their ability, where they're surfing. And, I don't deviate too much from the model, but I'll make a little bit of an adjustment, like, 0.1, 0.15 on the tail, and 0.25, 0.3 on the nose. And that reflects the type of wave that they're usually going to surf. What else do we got?
What is the reason for the hard edge in the last 12 inches of a squash tail?
Reason for the hard edges. Once again, I go back to my my basic, how do I answer a design question? You take it to extremes. If you had a very, very round rail, the board would roll into turns. It wouldn't really squirt or accelerate. if you had very, very hard rails, the board would fight back. It would from putting it on the rail, unless you had a very, very thin board. But it would fight back, and it might slide because the water is having a hard time wrapping around the rail. And so that's why most surfboards have the rails are the softest, through the midsection, and they get firmer as you go towards the nose, and they get firmer as you go towards the tail, and then I call it the business end of the board, the back 18, 24 inches. They start to get very firm, and the last, different pros over the years have said, well, I want the edge to start 3 inches above the fin, and I go, well, do you want it gradual or do you want it abrupt? And sometimes they're very specific, where they want the edge to start and how abruptly they want it to start. Back in the day, longboards used to have pretty round rails, and you look at the way that they turned. The lack, and even more modern eggs, they will get speed as they get going, but out of the chute, they're the rounder the rail is, kind of the softer the turn is, and the less acceleration you're going to get.
Joe Pataglia says, in your thoughts on glass on versus non, been considering glass ons on local boards and boxes on travel?
If you asked me that question 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'd say glass-ons, because the fins hadn't really evolved yet. They were the box fins are primarily made out of plastic, and if you're a kind of a beginning surfer or you're surfing very soft waves, the flex on the plastic is kind of a gradual, it's a slow flex, it's a full flex, but then surfers started figuring out they could get some people to make fiberglass fins, to fit the boxes, and they realized what they were missing. And then I think the market's pretty much dominated now by composite fins that come in various different flexes, and amount of flex, and the type of flex. And I almost did a t-shirt that said, "Friends don't let friends ride plastic fins." You usually, if you ask, you can get a pair of plastic fins with your new board, but I wouldn't ride them. I'd say pretty much composite all the way. And it's when I say composite, you talk about the flex. It's the base can be made very rigid, like say the first third, and the next third could be a little bit flexy, and then the tip could be, soft, medium, or stiff. And there's days when you might want a firm fin, and then there's days where you might want a little bit softer flex. There's days when you might want more fin area. You might want bigger front fins and a smaller trailer. Glass-ons, I think if you've been surfing a long time and you know what you like and you know what you don't like, glass-ons might be an option. But they're a lot of extra work too. But we still do them occasionally.
When did you find Venturi? The Venturi channels?
The Venturi. Well, that's an interesting question. I had a Campbell Brothers Bonzer shaped for me by Mike Eaton. Mike shaped for Bing, and Larry Gordon got the Bing license in 72 or 3, I think. And Mike Eaton, another great shaper. He's moved to Hawaii. But I had him make me a Bonzer bottom, and it had good attributes and not so good attributes, but I think, over the years, occasionally I get a request for one, but I think the first production board we did was it a Dwart, maybe, or
I think it was the Hustler.
Or the Hustler?
Yeah.
Oh, the Hustler. Yeah, we've got the Rooster, the Hustler, Dwart, a few others with Insuries, and so I think we've been doing them for 15 to 20 years now, and they're great. Hats off to the Campbell brothers. I shouldn't say this, but I don't really necessarily agree with their fin setup. But I love the concave. If it's made right, it really adds a lot of squirt to the board. Oh, Andre, top 3 mistakes people make when ordering boards. That is a great question, because I get, it's funny. I get all kinds. Most of the people are super psyched, super appreciative. Other people not so much, and so I have a 9-ball of the week award or something. But you got to learn to trust your shaper. You pick a shaper because, well, hopefully he's got a reputation and he makes the kind of boards. He's known for making the kind of boards that you're interested in. So I'd say but the biggest mistakes is, the internet now is a source of knowledge, but it's also a source of misinformation. And so you can learn a lot by going on the internet. And there's a lot of people that, that's why I have a profile on my custom order form, because I want to get a sense of, well, how old you are, how big you are, how tall you are, how heavy you are, an honest assessment of your surfing ability, where you like to surf, what the last board is you're riding. And you'd be surprised, I get a lot of orders that people give me no personal information. And over the last few years, I've come to realize that they're good with stock dimensions. But the beauty of a custom board is you can get it dialed in, even if you're more of a beginning surfer. The beginning surfers always want to go too short, too quickly, and they hurt their progress, because you're not catching as many waves, you're not making as many waves. It's better to take it slowly. I always say 6 inches at a time. So I think the length and the size of the board is an issue sometimes, and people like to argue with me. All right. I had a guy, Phil, who started getting boards from me in the mid to late 70s, and he was a builder, and so he had some design, architect skills, and he'd always come to me with all these complex drawings of what he wanted in his board, exactly how he wanted it, and I would usually humor him. I made a little bit of progress on what I thought would be good, and he started disappearing every year for about 6 months, then 8 months. Then he was going down to this secret spot, a right point break on mainland Mexico, and he had pretty much all to himself for decades. Married a young Mexican lady, built a house down there, and he just came back here from time to time to check in, get new boards. And this secret point is one that Rip Curl had I think it was ASP contest. It had Rip Curl threw a major event there, and it blew up.
Baja de la Cruz.
Yeah, Baja de la Cruz. The point. Phil, after about 10 years of getting boards with me and wrestling with me over the designs, he came to me one day, and I go, Phil, where's your notes? He goes, you make me whatever you want to make me. Which is I like a little bit of input, but at the same time, I like that kind of trust. Doggone it, if I don't get it right the first time, then I'll build you another board right away, and we'll figure something out. But so, trusting your, trying to go too small too quickly, learning to trust your shaper, and then patience. Surfboards are hand built. There's what 7, 8, 10 hours of handwork that gets in. We get backed up a little bit, and we have an approximate delivery date depending on the type of construction you're getting. PU polyester is the quickest. Anything with epoxy slows the board down a little bit. But we have, it's right there in big bold print on the custom page. And I get people that approve their board, and then a week later they're all over us. I got a trip coming up in 3 days. Occasionally I'll rush a board, if it's a good person, he has a good reason, I'll rush a board. I mean, we can build a board in 24 hours. We have done some. But I think the third thing is patience. And, if it takes an extra week or so, gosh, I remember when I used to get boards from other people, I'd be chomping at the bit, but I'd also respect that, I'm not the only person on the planet getting a board from this shaper. There's a long list of things, Andre, that mistakes people are. I think when people get a chance to communicate with me, I say talk with your shaper. I work in the evening, so I'm a little bit hard to get a hold of, but I'll answer anybody's email. And we have conversations online, and they turn more and more of their design concept over to me. And more often than not, I get a big thank you letter after they've ridden the board a few times. How many boards do you think you have shaped? I've answered this question, or I've offered. I've roughly shaped 1,000 boards, give or take, most of my career. In the last few years, I've been primarily pro. But so I guess I've hand shaped between 40 and 50,000. The number of boards I've designed, 100,000. People. I got a person that was arguing with me the other day on the rocker for a Moby fish. He wanted to extend the flat planing area in the middle farther up the board and then have a more abrupt nose rocker. And I go, no. He goes, well, why? I go, have you ever seen a wave with a broken up face like that? I go, you can have curves that accelerate a little bit here and there, but I finally got him talked down, and he finally he accepted my rocker because I said, look, I've built a couple thousand of these things. Trust me.
Blade or SD for everyday California waves?
Blade?
Or SD?
Oh, it's a toss-up. But I think a blade. I think because everybody needs to try a flat deck board, at least one in your lifetime, your surfing career. Maybe the first day or two, it's going to feel really weird to you. But if you give it a few days, give it a week or two, you'll trip. Most people I build flat deck boards for come back for more. And I can do, we have flat deck bottles, but I can do basically any of our outlines with any of our bottoms in a flat deck. I did a bigger smoothie for a friend back east, and he's been getting boards from me for 20 years, and he, after he'd ridden it for a week or two, he said the same thing. He said, well, it kind of felt weird at first, but my God, it paddles so good. It gets up and it goes so fast, and it's loose. The SD is a great all-around performance board, but I think, we offer several flat deck designs, and I think you owe it to yourself to try one. Or if you have a favorite shape that you've been riding, I could do a flat deck board. That's the beauty of custom shaping, is you can.
Oh, you did a couple. Came out nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do I get an Aki replica board? That's a flat deck board too.
The Aki replica is a pretty flat deck, not completely, but it's flattish. And all you gotta do is go on, go to the custom section, fill out your profile, and pick a size, and email it to us. Either service@rustysurfboards.com or rusty@rustysurfboards.com, and I will happily build you an Aki replica, a custom Aki replica.
This guy said, let's bring the piranha back to the custom order. That's right, because it's on archives.
The what part?
The piranha.
The piranha? Oh, yeah. The piranha was probably the best-selling board for years. I think part of it was the optical appeal with the triple wings. But it was also a kind of a semi-fishy board, but with the triple wings, the tail pulled into a 5.5, maybe a 6-inch corner to corner. And it was very popular. And I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I had a good friend say, well, I love piranhas, but have you got anything else I might like? I thought to myself, well, what if I just take the piranha and I put kind of a round tail, round pin on it, full like 15 inches. And I made it, and they freaked, and they go, this thing is so good. It's smooth, it's loose, but it's smooth, and so the piranha has evolved into the smoothie. I still make piranhas from time to time. I'm not even. Is it on our archive list?
I think it is. You can really order a piranha.
Yeah, you can or you can't.
You cannot.
Yeah.
I think it's on the archive.
Well, yeah. If you email me and you want a custom piranha, I can do it. But I'd also suggest trying a smoothie. And one thing about the piranha, it had a little bit fuller outline, but it had a kind of a semi-dome deck, and then it had a little bit thinner rails. It was actually I was inspired by Chris Ward. I was watching, checking out the surf one day in Hawaii on the North Shore, and Chris Ward was surfing, and I go, he's ripping. And there were some pretty good sized sets too. And as he came in, I went up and I talked to him and I checked out his board. I go, man, this thing's insane. And he goes, yeah, I think Tim Patterson shaped it. Hats off to Timmy. And so I made a crude drawing as the story goes, on a napkin, but no, it was a piece of paper. And I pinned up my shaping room, and I started making a few for friends to try. And sure enough, it was we got a lot of great boards in our archives. And sometimes they go so far back. I'll build them, but I also feel like we've progressed design-wise in the last 5 years. Much less 10 or 15 years.
This is a long one.
Oh.
It needs the help.
Okay. On shortboards for heavy guys for their height, 6'0", 220. Are there any design characteristics that will help me not have to move my back foot around as much? I found going shorter helps. Any else? Yeah, shorter is a good way to have. You have less board to deal with. But you're 6'0", you could ride a 5'10". Any one of our newer designs, like the blade is a fish, the hatchet's a semi-fish. Did I say the blade? The 419 is a fish. The hatchet is a semi-fish. So we've got some other semi-fishy boards. But I get a lot of guys your size, 220, that order boards. Well, I had a guy the other day, he's 220, and he wanted a 5.9 by 19 3/4 by 2.4 or something, and it was 31 liters and change, and I programmed it for him, but and I'll do this a lot, like if somebody is adamant about the design, they have all the numbers or anything, I'll program it, but if I feel it's too far off base for their size or their ability, I will offer a second design. And I'm not asking you to buy 2 surfboards, which some people think, but I'm simply offering a design that I think will serve you better. And so this guy that weighed 220 pounds, 1 to 5'9", under 20 inches wide, I sent him that design, but I sent him one, and that was 31 and a half, 32 liters. And I sent him that one, and then I sent him another one that was a little bit wider and a little bit thicker, and it was more like 35 liters. And right now our top team rider is Wade Carmichael, and Wade is 5'10", 5'11".
Wade is
he's not,
6'0".
He's the board he rides.
He rides 6'0".
Yeah, he weighs 5'11". He weighs 190 pounds, and he rides a 6'0". Yeah. And when we first started building boards, he thought he liked 30 and a half, but he's up to 31 or 31 and a half now, I think, liters. 31 and change. And so I say, every 10 pounds you can add a liter, give or take a little bit. So really, you got weighed by 30 pounds, like a board with 3 more liters than you're ordering. And Wade's one of the best surfers in the world. And, this guy, he's back east. He says he's advanced, and all right, I'll take his word on that. But, I've seen big guys ride small boards, but I've also seen them struggle. And so as a bigger guy, you can ride a shorter board, but, at 220, I'd seriously suggest, and if your skill level is high, 34 liters. If you're more intermediate or intermediate plus, 35, 30.
This is a good one. We already spoke about this, but it's always good to bring this question back. E-poly versus standard PU. What are the major differences?
I'm going to be putting that up on the website. I just did a...
Yeah. So people can check that.
A PUPE.
Yeah.
I didn't print it out, but anyways, the typical construction for the last 60 years has been polyurethane foam, a core. And the polyurethane has evolved over time, and it's become lighter and tighter selled and stronger. But it's still the heaviest construction. The polyester resin. You don't see many modern industries using polyester. It's in relation to epoxy resin, it's just not that strong, and it doesn't have as good as flex characteristics. So we offer the least expensive board you can get from us is a PUPE, which refers to polyurethane core. PE is the polyester resin. Then we offer the E-poly, which is epoxy glass resin and a polyurethane core, and that's become quite popular. It's 40 extra or something. The E-polys are 40 extra.
40.
Yeah, they're about 40 extra, but they're worth every penny of it because the epoxy resins, especially the Clark foam, closed its doors. We're all kind of forced to find blanks, and I had some, but I contacted Greg Loren because I knew he had been into EPS epoxy boards forever, and he made some suggestions. But even in the 15 years, I got a lot of shops to stock up on EPS boards, and about a month later, people start calling me and start going, I'd like it if you could take these boards back because they're all turning really yellow. And so, oh my God. But over the last 15 years, surfboard-specific epoxy resins have been developed, and they become brighter, wider, clearer, and easier to use. And so, with the E-Polys, you get a board that's a little bit lighter, fractionally lighter, definitely a lot stronger, has better flex, it maintains its flex longer. The polyester resin has a pretty steep cure curve, and you set it aside. Whether you ride it constantly or whatever, over time it's going to start cracking. You'll get dents, and then the edges of the dents will become cracked, and the boards. I have friends that are riding 15, 20-year-old polyester glass job boards, and they're hard as bricks. But you want a little bit of give in your glass job. The flex is very important. Surftex, that was a nice attempt to make, and the boards are pretty indestructible. I mean, I'd see one broken occasionally, but not very often. And I had a few. I had a big cat that I rode in Fiji, and at first I liked it, but then I realized it really wasn't flexing, and it wasn't denting. And so I was kind of over that. The Surftex were vacuum bagged epoxy styrofoam boards. But the polyester, the polyurethane core glass with epoxy, $40 more. It's really catching on. And then the EPS boards. The EPS foam is roughly 10% lighter. You can get surfboard polyurethane foam, different densities. You can get EPS. I can get 3-pound density sometime for guns. And there's a handful of guys that ride them. Jamie Sterling. Haven't made Garrett a board in a little while, but Garrett used to like it. And to be honest, some of the boards these guys are getting are so long and so thick that it was pretty tough to get them out of polyurethane blanks. But so the EPS can be 1 pound, and that's pretty darn light. I think there's a bottom line to how much a board could really weigh and still ride well. I mean, we could make a 4.5 pound board like we made for Robbie Bain for the wave pool contest in Allentown, 1985. His board was epoxy EPS core, and it weighed about 4.3 pounds. But the EPS core you have to glass with epoxy. Because polyester resin will melt the EPS. It doesn't turn it into a big blob, but it does melt, and so you have to glass EPS with epoxy. And that's the lightest construction. That's the boards ballpark end up being 10% lighter than the polyurethane cores, and that's great for small waves. The boards are livelier, they're frisky. When you start to get a little bit of size, a little bit of bump on the surface, people go from saying, oh, they're lively, to, oh, they're kind of frisky, or, oh, they're kind of twitchy. But, you get a step-up board, you get it made out of EPS, but you just glass it heavier, 6.6 top, 6 bottom. What I touch on real quickly is what kind of cloth we're using. I think for the most part we've been using E-cloth in 4 ounce or 6 ounce, but I always used to get a layer of S cloth on my deck, and the S cloth is it's a flatter weave, it's a tighter weave, and so it's more compression has more compression denting strength than the E-cloth, but it's a little bit stiffer. And A lot of guys, if they want a lighter board but a little bit stronger board, I'd say epoxy resin and get a layer of S-cloth in the deck. I had a board where it was all S-cloth, and it has a weak shear strength, and I buckled it. And I've only broken a couple. My boards are pretty big. I've only buckled a few in my 50 some odd years of surfing, and it only costs what, $5 a yard extra.
Yeah.
That's for your board, if 10, 15 extra bucks, it's worth. I think it's worth it. And that coupled with epoxy resin, you're going to have no matter what core you have, you're going to have a board with really good, lively flex and good strength, and it'll maintain its flex a lot longer than polyester resin.
2 minutes, Rusty.
All right, I got time for one more.
2 minutes only.
Okay.
Do you adjust tail rocker based on fin setup? More for thrusters, less for twin quads?
Rocker?
Yeah, if you adjust tail rocker based on fin setup.
Do I base the tail rocker?
Yeah, if you adjust the tail rocker. I don't think we've got 2 minutes for that.
Yeah. Real quickly, I make rocker adjustments more for the type of waves that somebody's going to surf. A little bit lower rocker for flatter, slopier waves, a little bit higher rocker for hollow waves. And I can get it. I got it. So, everybody, you have a good week. Thanks for tuning in.